The night was thick with silence, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. Ella stood on the porch of the little cabin she'd found through a classified ad pinned to a grocery store board, miles away from the suffocating city life and even further from the bruises, both visible and not, that her husband had left on her spirit. Her knuckles trembled as she held a steaming cup of chamomile tea close, more for comfort than taste. The wind rustled the tall wheat in the distance, and beyond the fence stood a figure, a man, tall, quiet, leaning against a weathered fence post, cowboy hat pulled low over his brow. His name was Luke. Ella hadn't meant to end up here. When she fled 3 weeks ago with nothing but a backpack, a few bills, and a picture of her late mother, she drove until her gas light blinked and fate brought her to the dusty outskirts of a forgotten Texas town called Silver Ridge. She had no plan, just the overwhelming need to breathe again. Luke had found her parked near his property, eyes red, knuckles white on the steering wheel, and a look in her gaze that reminded him too much of someone he once failed to save. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "You look like you need somewhere to rest," and led her to the guest cabin behind his ranch house. In the following days, Ella began to see something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Luke was unlike any man she'd known. He spoke more with his actions than words. He fixed the squeaky screen door on her cabin without being asked, left fresh eggs from his hens by her porch each morning, and taught her how to ride a horse, always keeping a respectful distance. She noticed how he treated everyone the same, from the gruff feed store owner to the wide-eyed children who waved at him as he rode through town. There was no performative kindness with Luke. It was just who he was. Still, Ella kept her guard up. Every time he knocked gently on her door, her heart would leap in fear before she reminded herself that Luke wasn't him. Every kind gesture made her flinch internally, wondering what it would cost her. But the cost never came. Luke's protection felt like a quiet fortress, built not with walls, but with decency, patience, and respect. One evening, after a rainstorm had swept the valley clean, Luke found her by the old barn, eyes fixed on the sky where orange and purple bled into one another. "You ever gonna tell me what you're running from?" he asked gently, not turning to look at her. She didn't answer right away. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "From someone who made me believe I was nothing." She paused. "And from the version of me that started to believe him." Luke took a deep breath. "Then let me tell you something true. You're not nothing. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone your silence." That was the first night she cried. Not just tears of fear, but of release. But peace is a fragile thing, and shadows have a way of creeping back in. One afternoon, Ella stepped into town to mail a letter to her sister. As she turned from the counter, her blood ran cold. Standing just across the street, leaning against a rust-colored pickup truck, was him. Her husband. His eyes locked with hers like twin daggers. He hadn't spoken, hadn't moved. He just watched, a sick smirk curling on his lips as if to say, "I found you." Ella ran. She didn't even remember getting into the truck Luke had lent her. She barely registered the gravel crunching beneath the tires as she sped back to the ranch. By the time she stumbled into the barn, hyperventilating, Luke was there, his brow furrowed with worry. "What happened?" "He's here," she gasped, the words tasting like poison. "He found me." Luke didn't flinch. He stepped closer, looked her in the eyes, and said firmly, "Then he'll have to go through me." Later that night, the inevitable came. Her husband drove up the long ranch road, headlights slicing through the dark like blades. Luke was already standing in the middle of the gravel driveway, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Ella watched from the porch, heart pounding. "You harboring my wife," the man spat, stepping out of his truck with the swagger of someone used to intimidating others. Luke didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. But there was iron in his words. "She's not your possession. And if you take one step closer, I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes and your face on every restraining order in the county. She's mine. You think some country cowboy's gonna stop me? Luke took a slow step forward. I was raised to protect what's good. And she's good. She's brave. And she deserves better than the hell you put her through. So turn around, now, before this ends worse for you. There was a long silence. A showdown without guns. Her husband sneered, but something in Luke's stance, his unshakable calm, his steady eyes, made him hesitate. For the first time, Ella saw fear flicker in her abuser's gaze. He turned, cursing under his breath, and drove off into the night, his tail lights shrinking until they vanished over the horizon. Ella collapsed into tears once more, not from fear this time, but from awe. Not because Luke had rescued her, but because someone had chosen to believe in her worth, to stand up for her without expecting anything in return. That moment broke something in her, the chains of self-blame she'd carried far too long. Over the next few weeks, the weight on her chest grew lighter. Luke taught her how to fix fences, tend to horses, and believe in herself again. One crisp morning, as they repaired a broken gate together, Ella looked up at him, straw between his lips, dirt on his hands, and asked, "Why did you help me that day?" He shrugged. "Because someone I loved once needed help and no one showed up. I swore if I ever saw that look again, lost and scared, I wouldn't walk away." Ella touched his hand gently, her voice trembling. "You didn't just show up. You stood for me." Luke met her gaze, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. It wasn't fireworks or a dramatic kiss. It was something quieter, more sacred, the birth of a love rooted in healing, trust, and time. Months passed. Spring bloomed across the valley, and so did Ella's spirit. The townsfolk came to know her for her gentle kindness and resilience. No longer the girl who ran, but the woman who rebuilt. And always, beside her, was the cowboy who never tried to fix her, just stood beside her as she fixed herself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Luke handed her a small carved wooden horse. "Made it for you," he said gruffly. She laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Thank you. For this. For everything." He looked at her then, his voice soft. "You don't owe me thanks, Ella. Just promise me, never stop being brave." And she did. Because sometimes, the deepest kind of love isn't the one that sweeps you off your feet, it's the one that holds you up until you can stand again. And in the heart of a quiet cowboy, she found not just protection, but the freedom to become who she was always meant to be.